Hello there, welcome back to Jennie Designs with Paper. Thanks for stopping by my channel today. I'm using my spreadsheet and the random number generator to create a card. So get comfy and let's get crafty. The brand randomly chosen was Spellbinders. The product was layering dies. So I have chosen these two underwater and underwater marine life die sets to be using, along with some scraps of colored cardstock. I have also picked out for my stash this, color palette. Color palette was from the Sarah Renee Clark Color Cubes. Box 2, I chose card number 280. And this stamp set is an old one from my stash from my favorite things. I will be using one of the sentiments for that. The extra was enamel dots. So I am using these dewdrops, and the theme was birthday. So I'm using the happy birthday fishes. So I have cut everything out, cut all the layers out off screen because that took a hot minute. I did use the same color palette that showed on the card front because it matched the color cube card I pulled out, so why not? I'm using a black card base today, and this is going to be a portrait style, but a side fold portrait style US A2 size card. That means it is 4 1/4 inches wide by 5 1/2 inches tall. So once I have scored that piece of cardstock and burnished the fold, I can go ahead and start laying things down. I have used the underwater tunnel dies, all 3 of them, to kind of create this tunnel effect. I have tons of ideas in my head of how I could use these in other ways, including the throwaway pieces. The parts we're not using, those will make perfect puddles on cards or pools or ponds or whatever. So this is how it's going to kind of sort of look. So unfortunately, there was a lot of the footage that my camera wigged out on, like it was out of focus and it zoomed in super extra trying to focus, and like I don't even know. So I have all of the pieces on my Positively Tacky craft mat, and I'm using my Copic markers to add some shadows and depth and dimension to these die cuts. Even though I used colored cardstock, I can still do that. And I used my hex chart from Sandy Allnock to pick the colors that most closely coordinated with my cardstock so that I could have a lighter color and a darker color to kind of blend those together and create those shadows. So here we have our turtle put together. I'm going to stick this yellow fish together. The fins are out of a gray cardstock. So that was a little bit of I debated using vellum, and I decided to go ahead and stick with the gray because I did plan to use the Copics, and sometimes Copics on vellum, they kind of smear sometimes because vellum is non-porous for a little bit. So once we go ahead and get all of the dimension in, we can finish assembling the fishes. It did take me a minute. Some of the pieces are really little, and you will notice that all of these little fishes, or maybe you didn't notice and I'm just being extra, the eyeball, little eyes are cut out, and they're cut out from the same color of cardstock, but then I would have had to find all the little eyes and glue them back in and color them black. So I came up with a plan B because all of those little tiny pieces were somewhere on my desk. And by somewhere, I mean, I don't even know. They were little, and they fell out of the die and did not get salvaged. Let's just put it that way. They are probably on the floor. All of the little pieces end up on the floor, right? Clearly, this is sped up. I promise I don't move this fast. I think in its entirety, this card was about an hour of assembly, die cutting and assembly. So I don't really move this fast. The joys of editing, right? So I'm going to go ahead and start on this little red fish. For the red cardstock on the fish, I used one red marker. I used 2 red markers and then one of the cool grays to kind of blend it out. Just because red is a little bit harder to, for me, it's a harder color to blend, period. But especially on an already colored cardstock. For this little fish, I used orange for his fin, mostly because that's what was on the packaging, and I thought it was cute. So here are all of our underwater marine life dies that we're going to be putting on the front of our card. In the tunnel, the underwater tunnel die set, there's also an anchor and some seagrass and corals and things. So I did the same thing. I brought in Copic markers and On the anchor especially, there are some embossed parts, and that's where I settled the Copic, the coloring into. That's would be the deepest. They're embossed. It would cause a shadow there. On the rocks, same thing. I just added color to where the embossing part was. On the seagrass, I just added a little bit of color to the bottom. In the end, you won't even notice that because it's going to be stacked. I used the same orange on this orange coral as I did on the red because, again, I'm just trying to add a little bit of dimension that ends up not even being visible. So there's that. I did also go around the tunnel dies and add some kind of shadowing to those layers as well. So I just grabbed some markers. I used the cutout piece to hold up to my hex chart and find a couple of colors that I could really add some dimension on. And like you saw, I put the top layer on top of the bottom layer, traced around it with the lightest color, and then went back in with the darker and lighter color again. That is a trick I saw over at Kelly Taylor's website. She does that a lot, especially with her layering dies, so that she knows where to put the shadows. And I think it's a brilliant idea. Same thing on the next layer. On the top layer, there was a slight indentation from where the die had sat. So I just filled that part in with my marker, the indentation. So right here on this layer, I just kind of filled the indentation in. And this layer does actually tear at the bottom, which I kind of suspected was going to happen. So I layered it so that that was the bottom so that I could cover up that tear. The blue panels are 4 by 5 1/4 inches so that I have a little bit of a black border around, a card-based border around my card. Probably that was unnecessary. Also, it would have been way smarter for me to use liquid glue instead of double-sided adhesive because trying to get them lined up just right was, well, it was a little extra. Let's just go with that. It was a little fidgety. And I was trying to make sure that the edges lined up really well because they are stacked on top of each other. I'm not sure it was perfect in the end, I will be honest. But also, this is handmade, not Hallmark. And for $7 a card, the Hallmark ones better be perfect, is all I'm saying. And for real, that's how come I started making cards. I've probably said this before on my channel, but my husband and I are both from large families, which means we have lots of siblings, lots of nieces and nephews, lots of nibblings. And buying birthday cards for all of those people was getting outrageous. And this was when the cards were getting to $4 and $5 a pop, not $7 and $8 a pop. So I started making the birthday cards. And in my brain, I was saving myself so much money. In reality, I was becoming addicted to collecting art supply or craft supplies. That's okay, because I love my collection. It is a carefully curated collection of beautiful things, and sometimes an impulse purchase going in there. Once I have the tunnel layers or tunnel dies all stacked together, I'm going to go ahead and layer them onto my card base. Normally, I turn this into a landscape style card so that I can see at least 3 of the sides to get the margins at least visually the same. But it was a little bit harder on this, and I think it's because there was too much focusing on those cutout pieces in the middle. So now I'm going to zoom through the layering of all of the die cuts again. The first thing I did was put the anchor down, and I didn't put glue around all of the edges so that I could still stack things back and front. I did not do a practice run with this like on my desktop, so I didn't know where things were going to go. So I just had to kind of fiddle with it. And I did end up putting this little red coral back behind. So yeah, all of that coloring I did, super not visible, except like on the rocks. I really wanted one of the rocks to be back behind, and then I realized that's dimensionally weird because the rocks would be sitting on the ground. Okay, I did go back and add that Copic coloring to add a few more shadows in around the rocks where the one rock is on top of the other rock. And here it's another place I edited out things. My camera wigged out again. So I put foam tape on the back of the turtle. I put foam tape on the back of the red fish, and then the 2 yellow fish are glued down flat and kind of slid behind some of the layers. And for the foam tape, I'm using these little foam squares that I actually got at the Dollar Tree a couple years ago when I did a card class. For the eyes, I took these honeybee stamp pearls, flat black pearls, and I used these kind of bluish black ones. I used the tiniest ones, and that worked except for when they did the stick. And then I used the Simon Says Stamp Rainbow Splash droplets to create the idea of bubbles in the water. All things being equal, I should have put the sentiment on before I added the enamel dots because that left me with really only one place for the sentiment, which just covered up more of those die cuts. I used some Concord and Night white pigment ink and that My Favorite Things stamp set to stamp the sentiment. I also used my Brutus Monroe ultra fine detailed white, alabaster white, that's what it is. Alabaster white detailed embossing powder. And then I trimmed that all out. It is not the straightest trim. Yeah, it is what it is. And I'm like, oh, where am I going to? So guess where I had to put it? Down on top of those other die cuts. I should have done the droplets last. But, you know, all things being equal, there's a lot of things I should have done before I did something else in my life. I didn't get to 50-something years old and not have a few things I should have done differently. So, you know, it is what it is, and I think the fishes are super cute, and they'll be a wonderful birthday card for whichever member of my huge family gets it in the mail. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Here are a couple of other videos I think you would like. I've also added that subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed, I would love it if you did. Leave me a comment down below. I love to see what you have to say. Give me a thumbs up if you liked the video, and have a really fabulous day.